to assure the American people that we are going to leave no stone unturned.
We continue following tragic news out of Washington, D.C. tonight. Dozens of people killed after a military helicopter collided with an American Airlines jet near Reagan National Airport last night. We just learned one of the black boxes from that jet was recovered.
And we're taking a live look now at the scene where we are told dive teams have recently suspended operations searching for victims. Officials saying they've recovered as many victims as possible without risking damage to the wreckage.
Now again, the NTSB says they have recovered one of the critical onboard data recorders. As this investigation continues, we're also seeing reaction pour in throughout the day from those who knew people killed on board, including former Olympian Nancy Kerrigan.
You don't have to know everybody to feel that connection. We've been through the same thing, that training, that rigorous schedule of falling over and over and somehow picking yourself back up, which is like the main lesson I think learned in skating is you get back up. Keep on trying, and even when it's hard, you get back up. Even when you're crying, hurt, pain, you get back up and move forward. It's not easy, but that's what we all have to do now together.
The deadly plane crash rocked the ice skating community as the flight was carrying several members of the Skating Club of Boston.
Last night's crash now is the deadliest aviation disaster in the U.S. since November of 2001.
64 people were on board the jet, 3 on the helicopter. All are feared dead tonight. Crews have so far recovered the remains of at least 28 victims from the water.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the helicopter was participating in a routine annual training of night flights. He believes there was some sort of elevation issue that the DoD is investigating.
And a preliminary report from the Federal Aviation Administration finds there was one air traffic controller working 2 different tower positions at the time of the crash last night.
It's not an uncommon setup for one person to handle both local and helicopter traffic, but the report did say only having one controller was, quote, not normal for the time of day and volume of traffic. The NTSB says it's investigating whether this played a factor.
We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system.
Meanwhile, President Trump immediately appointing an acting commissioner of the Federal Aviation Administration in the wake of that crash. He is tapping a U.S. Air Force veteran who's worked at the agency for more than 2 decades. The FAA chief under former President Biden, Mike Whitaker, stepped down ahead of Trump's inauguration. Trump also fired the TSA chief on Inauguration Day and has not filled that role. Trump is without evidence blaming the agency's hiring standards for yesterday's collision. Meanwhile, those on board the flight included 6 people from the Skating Club of Boston, 2 athletes, 2 coaches, as well as 2 parents.
Yeah, those people were returning home to New England from a training camp in Wichita, Kansas. Aaron Coogan reports that all of them are connected to a figure skating facility in Norwood, Massachusetts.
It's really their second home, their second family, and we're all feeling this.
Among those aboard American Airlines Flight 5342 out of Wichita Wednesday,
the skaters and the people who were on that plane, they're our family too.
Husband and wife figure skating coaches Vadim Nomov and Evgenia Sishkova of Norwood.
Everything you've heard of them, like maybe being a little tough, but with a smile on their face, just to walk in here and not see that is, I think, would be very strange for everybody that comes here, especially those that are here day in and day out.
In Kansas this past week to coach some of the club's youngest elite talent at the U.S. Figure Skating National Development Camp, the couple are just 2 of 6 from the Skating Club of Boston who didn't make it home after the coveted event. Before becoming coaches at the Skating Club of Boston, the duo had claimed their own pairs title at the 1994 Figure Skating World Championships in Japan. Tonight, they leave behind their son, Max Nomov, who was also in Wichita, competing in the U.S. Championship, but had taken a different flight home.
Their son, I know, is on his way to D.C. He's scheduled to compete at the International Four Continents Championship. I don't know if he's going to do that or not. He's also an alternate for the World Championships, which will be here in Boston. So he has some tough decisions ahead of him, and my heart goes out to him because this is both his parents.
Gosh, just devastating. And meanwhile, we know a lot of people in our area fly out of PDX, which is, of course, right off the Columbia River. Now, the U.S. Coast Guard would lead the emergency response for any kind of aircraft incident over there. Local officials are constantly doing training to stay up to date if the worst were to happen. That training happens on the Columbia River multiple times a year, which is why the Coast Guard says if something happens there, they have a plan.
One of the main things that we have is we have a thing called the River Safety Task Force, and that brings together a group of it's Coast Guard, it's fire and law enforcement, and other port partners that all have vessels. And what we do is we practice for this type of event, right, and for on water catastrophes. So it's not necessarily like what or how it happened; it's the fact that it happened, and we're preparing for those contingencies.
One major training that crews take part in is called the Columbia Splash, which actually simulates a plane crashing into the water and helps refine those search and recovery effort skills.
Now, this, of course, is a story that is continuing to develop, so please stay with KVAL as we learn more throughout the evening and the following days. We will share that information on our website. If you scan that QR code, that will take you to kval.com, and we will also update on our social media accounts.